Now available in paperback and coming to Kindle Unlimited. John Haynes, Dark Succubus. The man who rules the world is tempted by a sultry succubus in this all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes, Dark Succubus in paperback or pre-order on Kindle Unlimited today. I got a chance to take a look at the Phase 4 schedule for Marvel Studios, and after taking a look at the schedule for Marvel's Phase 4, it looks like we are starting to leave the classic MCU and enter the era of what many are calling the SJW MCU. And when I take a critical look at the schedule for the films of the MCU in Phase 4, it looks like the MCU is about to get woke. And the first movie to kick off the MCU is a flashback tale from Black Widow. And I look at this lead-off movie and it doesn't really synergize with the other movies in the MCU or the Marvel Disney Plus series. So I'm not really seeing any sort of organics as related to building a storyline on any of these characters the way we had with Iron Man, Thor, the Incredible Hulk, and Captain America in building towards the Avengers. So I don't really see much in terms of organic transition from film to film or from film to series with this series of films, and I don't see how these characters can work together. I mean, the first movie is a flashback movie about Black Widow, who is dead, and that's followed up with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where we got the announcement that Falcon will be wearing the Captain America costume. And with the announcement that Falcon will be wearing the Captain America costume, that already confirms to everybody that SJW MCU will be the new direction for the MCU, and we already got glimpses of that with Captain Marvel and with Spider-Man Homecoming, where we started to see the SJW themes starting to creep into the MCU, and now we know that it's going to be permanent. And now that we know it's going to be permanent, now I see less incentive for many people to go see these MCU movies, because there's going to be a heavy push on identity politics, and it's all going to be about making sure that characters are a certain race or a certain gender or are following a certain sexual orientation. And with this focus on identity politics, we're not going to get a focus on plot, character development, and action sequences, things that are really lacking in Marvel Studios films after 20 films. Because after 20 of these MCU films, there has been a real serious problem as related to many of the technical elements in these MCU films. And this is where I have a real serious issue with them, because again, Infinity War was a lot like Star Trek The Next Generation's Part 1 of a season finale, and Endgame, which was absolutely terrible in terms of story as related to superhero ethics, was really terrible in terms of storytelling, and the special effects, again, were uninspired and repetitive. And this is a big problem with MCU films, and what's going to compound it even more is them continuing to push many of the social justice and identity politics narratives, and many of these movies are going to be as bad as many of the modern comic books that are on the comic store shelves, that rot on comic store shelves, and have literally driven comic shops out of business over the last 3 to 5 years. So we're going to get the same type of poor quality storytelling we got in modern Marvel comics on screen for these movies, and only out of all of these movies, I don't see much promise for many of them outside of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Now that one is the only one I see as looking promising, but the rest of them don't really grab me, because again, I don't see how they organically transition into each other, nor do I see much of a story to tell in many of them. For example, with this whole Eternals movie, I don't see a film that anybody is going to be compelled to see, because the Eternals were a poor selling comic for Marvel back in the 70s, and the whole concept of Eternals is something that I don't see really grabbing people and giving them an incentive to go out here and go see that movie. And when I look at these other projects, I don't really see anything to grab me. I mean, Doctor Strange was a very weak movie, and Multiverse of Madness, it doesn't really grab me again. And I look at this whole Thor movie and I see it as the icing on a crap cake, because the announcement that we're going to get female Thor, this is a real insult to anyone who has been a fan of Thor, and it is a complete insult when you think about how they have emasculated the character after Infinity War. Because in Avengers Endgame, they literally took all of the masculinity out of Thor, and they emasculated him by making him this big, fat, bumbling, stumbling, incompetent man. And now you want to take away Thor's identity by taking away his power. And this is a real slap in the face to not only all the Thor fans, but those who know Norse mythology, because Thor is not a title. Thor is the name of the son of Odin. So you're taking away this man's name and you're giving it to a woman, and that's a complete betrayal to the entire Norse legend. The Norse legends were very masculine, and they were all about stories of strong masculine men. And many who follow Norse mythology would see this as a complete insult, because Thor is a legendary mythical god, and his power comes from his father, Odin. So you want to take this patriarchal character and then give his power to Jane Foster, and I see that as a complete affront to the Norse legend and the Norse mythology, and I see it as an affront to what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby originally had intended for the character. So when I look at what they're doing by bringing this Jane Foster Thor into the MCU, it is one of the biggest insults to the character, and it's a very big insult to the comic fans who had been watching Thor in comics, and it just shows how little respect that Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige have for the source material and all of those legions of comic fans who have been buying tickets to see these movies over the last 10 years, buying the merchandise for the last 10 years, and how out of touch they've become, because instead of these movies being about staying true to the source material of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, it is now about pushing these social justice and identity politics narratives. And again, the female Thor, some would argue, oh, she was in the comics, but those were some of the worst selling comics in the history of Marvel Comics, and most people don't even regard them as being part of the canon, because that's how bad these comics are. And I look at this whole fourth phase, and I don't see phase 4, I see fail 4, and I see a whole host of failures that are going to come to Disney, because when I look at this whole slate of phase 4, I don't see any sort of organic transitions. I don't see any sort of organic build. And I look at it and I see that the MCU's original movies were lightning in a bottle, and it doesn't look like they're going to be able to hit that lightning once again. It looks like we are going to be in the beginning of the continuing decline of Marvel Studios, and it's going to be a very bumpy ride over at Marvel Studios, because when I look at these films and I look at these miniseries, they don't look like they're strong enough to be able to keep people interested. And I believe the MCU should have put a period at the end of things after 10 years, and Disney should have moved on. Unfortunately, because many of these Hollywood executives like Kevin Feige are too greedy and are looking to grab cash from gullible fans, they continue to pump out movies, not understanding it's going to be a new decade in 2020. It's time to create some new concepts. It's time to create some new characters, and it's time to move forward. And I have no interest in watching any of these movies, whether it be your Black Widow, or your Disney Plus series like with the Black Captain America, Eternals, or your WandaVision, or your Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, or even your Blade reboot, because I don't see how the story of the Vampire Hunter is going to work with the Eternals. I don't see how it's going to work with Shang-Chi. I don't see how any of these things work together to synergize the exact same way they did with the original Marvel Studios movies. And I look at this whole slate of movies and I see a completely jumbled mess, and I see a series of disasters that may possibly lead to Disney's bankruptcy in the future. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to donate to my Cash App, you can also donate to that link by clicking the link in the description box. And if you'd like to try some of my SJS Direct publications and the stories of the SJS Direct universe, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the Spinsterella trilogy, you may also do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.